Impressive. Most impressive.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, TFG1Mike from the GeekCast Radio Network, and in this special episode of GeekCast Radio, this is a interview preview. We normally don't do stuff like this, but I need something here to fill this episode because the next episode of the podcast after this is going to be the final GCR of the year for 2024, where Steve Megatron and I talk about the GCRN and what we did in 2024. But this episode right now that you're listening to the sound of my voice, this is an interview preview. We've never done this before. So, my buddy Dave Draper, who does the 12 months of Star Wars and other things with me over on our other podcast, Studio 2009, we got a chance to interview Craig Miller, Director of Fan Relations for Star Wars. This is a very short little snippet preview of that interview. And the only reason why it's a snippet preview interview is because the full interview is coming December 8th, 2024 in the 31 Days, 31 Podcasts with Studio 2009. Yes, folks, that's right. From episode 100 to 131, we're giving you 31 days, 31 podcasts all throughout the month of December. But please enjoy this little snippet of our interview with Craig Miller.
This is Craig Miller, Director of Star Wars Fan Relations, and you are inside the 12 months of Star Wars, only on Studio 2009.
Hello and welcome to another GeekCast Radio Presents interview, this time for GeekCast Radio and Studio 2009. I am, of course, TFG1Mike. Joining me, as always, in the Studio 2009 12 Months Star Wars series is Mr. Dave Draper. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello. I'm all right. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Today we have the most impressive opportunity to talk with Mr. Craig Miller, Director of Star Wars Fan Relations. Craig is much more than that, though. He is a film producer, advertiser, and writer. Hi, Craig. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you guys?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Hanging in there?
Yep. And we've got a lot of questions for Mr. Miller because we have read both of his books, Star Wars Memories and More Movie Memories, and wow, I haven't read that much of, like, I read books, but I don't read that was like close to 1,000 pages. It's been a long time since I've read 1,000 pages, but it was awesome. Both of them were amazing, and we have a bunch of questions for you, and Dave's going to kick it off.
Okay.
Yeah, well, first of all, because a lot of our readers might not have read those books yet, we're going to ask you about your background a little and how that got you into Lucasfilm and what the effect of being at Lucasfilm kind of had to set the trajectory of the rest of your, career.
I'll take that as being the question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I was, this was 1976. I was just graduating from college, and I had been all of my life a big comic book, science fiction, movie geek, fan, nerd. And through local science fiction fandom, I'd met Charlie Lippincott, who was, as you guys probably know, running Star Wars Corporation, which was the marketing, licensing, promotion side of Star Wars and Lucasfilm. And Charlie knew that there wasn't any good traditional way to market Star Wars. Science fiction, today every other movie is science fiction or superheroes. Back in the 70s, people thought science fiction was stupid. It was for little kids. It wasn't anything serious people went to see. The actors in Star Wars were not famous. Mark, Carrie, Harrison had, were at the very beginnings of their careers. They hadn't been stars of anything. And, even Peter Cushing and Alec Guinness were thought of by Americans, if they were thought of at all, as being character actors in a lot of British detective and horror movies. So they weren't thought of as big stars. And the way you marketed in the 70s was you got interviews in magazines and you got your stars booked on talk shows like The Tonight Show. And no one was going to book Mark, Carey, or Harrison. So Charlie came up with the idea of marketing the film directly to the target audience, which is science fiction fans. He knew about fandom, but he was not part of fandom. And so we had met, and as part of his explorations into fandom, and I ended up consulting with him that summer, 1976, on how to market Star Wars to fans. And we stayed in contact with my consulting through the next year. And after Star Wars came out and was a big hit, I was hired to come to Lucasfilm full time as part of the publicity team under the title of Director of Fan Relations.
Very cool, very cool. So just out of curiosity, because neither of us have been to a movie studio to watch a film at all in our lifetimes, but was there a difference in getting to watch the film at the studio it was made? Like that first time you're first seeing the film, just seeing it at the studio. Was there a difference for you versus going to a movie theater and seeing a movie like that? Like, did it have more, was there more quote unquote privilege to it because it was a special thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. Especially remember, I wasn't a jaded career film, person, a filmmaker, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. I had been to movie studios a couple of times, but not in any official capacity. So just the whole experience of going to the studio, which was 20th Century Fox, and going into a screening room, and this was a screening room filled with people, and seeing Star Wars. I first saw it, I don't know exactly, 2-3 weeks before it opened. Even then, it wasn't quite completely finished, but but it was as close to finished as, there was nothing noticeably unfinished. And so it added excitement to the event, but I don't know that Star Wars would have needed anything extra to sell me, like so many people, but especially as someone who had a lifelong love of science fiction. That opening scene, with the blockade runner and the Star Destroyer coming on screen and coming on screen and coming on screen. By the end of that scene, the movie had me. It was just amazing.
Yeah, you mentioned in that chapter, My First Viewing, you talked about how emotional your reaction was to seeing the completed film for the first time. Yeah. Was there any other moments at Lucasfilm that had kind of a similar impact?
Oh gosh, it yes and no. I mean, it's going to London and going on stage into the ice cave and seeing the full-size Millennium Falcon.
Oh yeah. And
and the X-wings and everything. That was from the science fiction kid. It was just amazing. Between seeing that screening of Star Wars and going on to that stage was about 2 years. So I'd been on a lot of other movie lots and seen other things filming, but Star Wars had become such an important part of my life, and it was such an amazing. I mean, we all know it was an amazing film. So then to be on the stage with all of that stuff surrounding you, that was just amazing. The first time I got to operate R2-D2.
Which was Sesame Street, right?
Which was, on Sesame Street. We did 5 segments that went into different episodes of Sesame Street. Getting to operate R2 was terrific. I mean, who doesn't love R2?
Yeah. Only heretics don't love R2 because, yikes. And everyone makes fun of me for liking the scene in Revenge of the Sith. It's either, is it Revenge or is it Attack? whenever he starts flying, I'm like, ooh, yay, we get to actually see R2 doing stuff beyond the normal awesome stuff that he did in the original trilogy. I was like, R2 can fly. That's awesome. Everybody makes fun of me because I like that stuff. Oh, boy. This is what it is.
I was just going to quickly interject that I know what you're saying because I got to go to Disney World last year. And at Galaxy's Edge, walking in and seeing the life-size Falcon was, really kind of a big deal for a lifelong Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, it should be, and they know that. That's why it's sitting there in the middle of a giant courtyard, so you can get that full effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Good old Disney World. Gotta love it. So your books are filled with fascinating anecdotes and personal stories. Can you share any particular memorable or surprising experience that didn't make it into either of the books? Unless you're already working on a third book.
No, I'm not working on a third book like those. There's between the two books, there's over 200,000 words, 800 some pages. Mm-hmm. That's an awful lot of stuff to remember. I don't know what story I could tell you that isn't part
already
of that.
There? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we all have things we do in our life. I went to the supermarket and I bought eggs.
Well, yeah.
I tell stories that are that I hope are entertaining and are amusing or interesting, but there's a lot of what happens between all those stories that, it may be Star Wars, but it was still going to work every day.
Right.
There was still deadlines to meet, and sometimes you have to deal with people who you don't care that much for or want to deal with, but work requires that. So it's nice that I was working on something wonderful and magical, and for the most part working with people I really liked.
Speaking of the people you worked with, like you offer a lot of glimpses into how guys like George Lucas and Charles Lippincott worked. Was there any other insights or observations you can share about them or other notable figures you encountered at Lucasfilm?
Well, I worked with George. Charlie, of course, for the first year and a half was my direct boss until he left. Gary Kurtz, I worked with extensively. Gary became a good friend, and we worked together on a lot of movies over the next 40 years until he unfortunately passed away. But he was great. He was always surprising. Gary always came across as very serious and solemn, but he did have a joking, silly side to him. I tell that story about the impromptu prank we played on Mark Hamill in Star Wars Memories, which just surprised everyone. I mean, do you want me to tell that story?
No, people need to read the book. That was funny, but people need to read the book. When I was reading both books, and this is aside to what my next question is going to be, but when I was reading both of them, I'm like, this is why I love reading, because I'm reading somebody's story that I had never experienced, thought I would ever. That's why I love autobiographies, because they're from a time that no one would really know. Like, none of us who are younger than you are, obviously, sir, and stuff like that. It's like, that is so cool. Like, listen up. We'll get to the offices, but like all your office moves and stuff like that, I was like, oh, that is so cool. He got to do various things at each different location and everything else. And it's a nice look back in time. And I think everybody needs to read more autobiographies of people that are older than them, that people that had adventures and things from those 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, because it's a nice little snippet of history.
Well, and I also think it's interesting because, like, I'm a fan. I've been a fan since I was 6 years old. But, like, it's from a fan's perspective. You were working at Lucasfilm, but you also went in as a fan. Whereas a lot of times, there's the famous William Shatner Get a Life bit on Saturday Night Live, because it was a job for these guys. Whereas you're a fan in the heart of something that fandom was like, oh my God, it had to be amazing, kind of, in a way.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It was. I mean, it was a job, but, it's that saying, a kid in a candy store. I was there working, but I was doing stuff and associating with people and things I never dreamed I would do. I grew up in Los Angeles, but my family wasn't in the entertainment industry. I never thought I'd be in the entertainment industry. I didn't know what, I wasn't an actor. I didn't want to be a director. I didn't have any thought about, I'll end up in the movie business. That was never part of my imagining. So it was, amazing. It was dealing with people who I never thought I'd deal with, doing things, flying to different countries and being on movie sets and locations and going to premieres and all that kind of stuff. It's nice to have a job where you get to do cool, fun things. It wasn't only cool, fun things, but it's nice when you can sometimes do cool, fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. You provide a detailed account of the challenges in securing studio approval for Star Wars, including the role of market research. In your opinion, how has the film industry's approach to market research and audience feedback evolved since when you were doing it? Okay, well, I never did the market research, but Fox had a market research department, and I'm sure studios still do, and they make sense. But as I mentioned in the book, one of my degrees is in social psychology. Social psychology is in part things like market research and testing and studying opinion, polling, all that kind of stuff. The people at Fox did that mostly valid research, but they asked the wrong people the wrong questions. It's the way they tested movies, not the part where they show it to them and, say, what did you think of it? But the sort of advanced testing they do. What they did on Star Wars was primarily two things. Here's a list of types of movies: comedy, drama, war, Western, mystery, romance. Science fiction was on the list. They asked people, which of these are you most interested in? Which of these are you least interested in? They also give them lists of titles. What does this title suggest to you? Does this title sound interesting to you? Like it'd be a movie you'd want to see? Mm-hmm. Those are valid questions to ask, but they are limited in scope. Plus, what they did is they went out to Hollywood Boulevard, which in LA, even back in the 70s, was a sort of mid-level street with many movie theaters, but not huge amounts of traffic. Mm-hmm. And they asked them these questions in the middle of the afternoon. Well, these were not people who were likely to go see a science fiction movie. So when they asked them those questions, science fiction was one of the bottom 2 or 3 types of movies people wanted to see, and no one understood what Star Wars as a title meant. Science fiction wasn't a thing. We were still in Vietnam. You hear Star Wars, people were going, I don't know what that is. Is it about Vietnam? Is it about movie stars in Vietnam? They didn't know what was going on. So it's not really bad. Market research is bad. It's just it wasn't handled well. You can do good market research, but it has to be done carefully and thoughtfully. The advice Fox got was, don't make a science fiction movie. And if you do make this movie, change the title. No one will go see a movie called Star Wars.
Well, and the whole industry kind of was changing at that time, too, wasn't it? Because Jaws, was the first summer blockbuster. And Jaws was the first film that said, hey, these teenagers, they got a lot of money. They want something to do during the summer. And Star Wars sort of came along and cemented that. But it was, the industry was changing, and who was going to see movies was changing.
Yeah,
they hadn't caught up yet.
Yeah, to a great extent, that's true. Jaws was absolutely the first big blockbuster. Summer was thought of as a time that kids went to movies, adults didn't go to movies, adults went on vacation. Wasn't a good time to release movies.
Bum, bum, bum.
Join us next time here on GeekCast Radio.
You've just listened to GeekCast Radio on the GeekCast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at GeekCast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCast Radio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.